when else are you going to get a chance to try this, right? Like, it was a cool opportunity, and go through
Do it when you're young.
Yeah.
Experiment with as many things as possible.
Yeah, and I also think, like, to be honest, like, I don't know if this is ever written down, but like, I think there was also thinking about go no go points, right? Like, at a certain point, when I first started, I was like, this is my goal, and like, I have 2 years, I have a postdoc at Cornell. Like, here's what I want to accomplish in those 2 years. Maybe I have an idea, but like, if I don't get it done in 2 years, or people just not responding, like, maybe I need to reevaluate my thoughts, and it's not like I'm so down the road I can't go back and change. And then just start to see those things, the successes line up, and then I think the people who care about you will kind of rally to your side and be like, okay, cool, like, we're supportive in this with you.
Yes. I call those pivot, persevere moments. You either pivot or persevere, and I encourage people to do them every quarter.
Yeah.
In everything that you're doing. It might be even the gym that you're going to. Do I want to keep going to this gym? Is my workout routine going well? Do I need to pivot or persevere? My career, the relationships, because as you mentioned, I mean, you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. You are very much a compilation of the people you meet, the books you read, the experiences you experience, the places you travel to, and that becomes who you are as a person. And so you need to be selective on the people that you're surrounding yourself with, the choices that you're making, the books you're reading, etc.
Welcome to the Phil with Forbes 30 podcast. This is Phil Michaels, Forbes 30 Under 30 entrepreneur and performance coach. Every year, Forbes names the top 30 entrepreneurs, leaders, and stars in the world. And each week, I bring you one of them to help you level up in your life and business. From celebrities like LeBron James to Kylie Jenner and Cardi B, to entrepreneurs with companies like DoorDash, Instagram, and YouTube, you're sure to learn from the list. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now it's time to level up. Level up.
Welcome to Phil with Forbes 30 podcast. Today we have a very special guest. He obtained his Ph.D. from Cornell University, designing new machine learning approaches that are better suited for biological problems. While at Cornell, he authored numerous scientific publications in the fields of machine learning, pharmacology, and precision medicine. His work has led to the development of new AI prediction methods, the discovery of a novel class of cancer therapeutics, and the start of new clinical trials. He then went on to complete his postdoctoral studies at Cornell Tech's Runway Postdoc program, where he developed OneThree Bio, the name of his company. He's an awardee of the Pharma Informatics Fellowship, was named one of the Forbes 30 Under 30 leaders in healthcare, and was listed as one of the top 100 AI leaders in drug discovery and advanced healthcare. His company, OneThree Bio, uses AI and computers to find why cancer is the way it is, and then using that to find new treatments. Please welcome Dr. Neel. Very excited to have you here, Dr. Neel. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Phil. Incredibly excited to be here. And thank you for the great introduction. I should bring you along to my pitch meetings.
My pleasure, and I'm happy to do that. I love it. I love the work you're doing. And you're calling in from Tennessee right now, Knoxville, right?
Yep.
But you're based out in New York City.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So OneThree is based out of New York, where we actually have just moved into some new offices in Manhattan and Grand Central. Sadly, no one is there right now, so I'm back at my childhood home in my sister's old bedroom in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Well, we appreciate you making the interview, even though you're with your family. It seems like a crazy time right now with COVID. How are you making the most of this time, and how are you aiming to play offense rather than defense?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, right? So I think there's kind of two pieces of that, right, on the personal and the professional. Right? So I'll talk about personal first, right? I think this is kind of a rare opportunity to spend time with family and loved ones, right? Like, I moved out of my parents' house a while ago, and besides the occasional Christmas or Thanksgiving, I haven't really had a chance to spend any prolonged period of time with them. So I think, one, just remembering, like, this is a unique moment to, like, reconnect with people who you might not be seeing that much or might not be spending a prolonged period of time with a lot. So, and that's been kind of great. Also, me and my girlfriend are both here, so just trying to get a chance to, like, think about, especially in this post-COVID world, right? Like, what are things and how can you maintain relationships and have fun when you can't leave the house, right? We're playing a lot of board games, playing a lot of bridge, playing a lot of online games, and just stuff like that, right? Finding new ways. And I think it's been opening my eyes to new experiences and stuff like that.
That's great. It's like your new normal. And
exactly.
How are you going to make the most of it? You're not expecting it to go back the way it was, but if this is the new normal, how are we going to make the most of it? And you're being creative, and it forces you to level up and reflect on your relationships and how do I get the most out of these relationships?
Exactly. And then on the professional end, I think it's forcing, us as a company, but also companies around the world to accelerate how they think about things, right? So luckily the work we do can be done pretty well remote, right? So our day-to-day work actually hasn't slowed down that much, compared to most IT companies, because we're computational. The progress of work has kind of stayed the same, if not actually increased. But this has kind of brought up a lot of questions about what does the future of work look like, right? I would say before COVID, right, talking about remote work is something that we had thrown around, startup, you throw around tons of things, and then other things come up on top of them, and you just never forget to go back to them. But this is kind of, forced us to think about how do you actually make a remote working company work, right? How do you build a remote first culture? How do you make sure that, people who are in different zones, who have different, personal lives, different, responsibilities, different, resources, can still continue to work. So I think it's forced us, and I'm really grateful of it, to think about inclusion and building beyond kind of the preset working norms. So I think that's been great to us. And actually, it's great.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's almost like a blessing in disguise. A lot of good's going to come out of this because it forces you to be more efficient and effective with how you're spending your time, how you're spending your energy, how you're spending your resources, your human capital, and your financial capital.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Right. I think, the financial capital, I think it's obvious, right? We fundraise. We were lucky enough in the spot to fundraise, fundraise right before kind of this happened, right? Purely serendipitously, right? So we're in a good spot financially, but, who knows when the market is really going to recover? And I think companies like ours, or companies around the world, big or small, are thinking through, how do we ride out the storm? And, even though we were in a good spot, we're still thinking through how to be more efficient with that. And also I would say thinking through things how do you stay efficient and be more organized, right? I would say I am notoriously not a very organized person, right? Even in grad school, I was the type of person who had a million things going on, and we're okay, let me focus on one and forget to go back to the other. And I think that's something that's a tendency of a lot of startups, right? It's kind of, I heard someone describe doing a startup as, the entire house is on fire and you're just trying to put out one fire at a time, right? And with
one
that
room
feeling,
at a time.
Exactly, yeah. And with that feeling, sometimes you get caught up in such of the minutia, you forget to go build in those best practices. But we no longer have the office to fall back on. I no longer can say afford to not be organized because I can just quickly grab someone and chat with them. We've had to.
It forces you to set up processes, systems, be very organized, because if you're not in person, you might have to access materials in a certain location. And exactly. I think you could argue, some might argue that it's actually going to force companies to realize hey, we were paying for these subscriptions or softwares or applications that we're not even really using. And we might even be paying people that we probably shouldn't have been paying to do things that we could outsource to AI or an app or software or a remote worker and have a distributed team. And what I love is that you get to do this out of New York City, where you have an amazing work center. I mean, this grand central idea where they put these workplaces in the offices for startups right in Grand Central, that's got to be an incredible experience. You're rubbing elbows and with other influential individuals, and you kind of bounce ideas off of each other. How has that been before this?
Yeah, it was fantastic, right? So if for anyone who's interested in this, New York or not, right? It's the program's called Grand Central Tech, and it's run by a group called Company. It's a company named Company.
It's like the Elon Boring Company idea.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll let them explain the story behind it. But it's a super cool institution, right? Really focused on bringing and building out the New York City startup ecosystem, and we loved it, right? I would say, I'm a first-time founder, and for any other first-time founders out there, I cannot overstate how important it is, the value you get simply from being around and working with other first-time founders, right? Like working through that and figuring that out. And just being in a spot where you're with 15 other startups that are running completely different companies, but just like being in that interaction, feeling that energy was amazing, right? And just like the idea of being in the center of New York like can't be overstated, right? Like I grew up in Tennessee, and I always dreamed of like one day I'm going to move to the big city. And I went to graduate school in New York, so like part of it, but it's a little bit off to the side, its own little medical campus world. But like just being in Grand Central and feeling the energy and the hustle and bustle, it's invigorating. And it's to be determined what the world will look like post-COVID, and like whether stuff like that will certainly still exist, but still exist to the level it exists before. I honestly don't know the answer. And we're trying really hard to think about like how can we maintain that sort of energetic feeling in a remote work setting. But I will just say like Grand Central Tech and the whole program and the whole building kind of built this amazing place. And
very cool.
It's a pity we can't be using it right now.
Well, I like that you're still playing offense and trying to get the most out of this time period that you can. And I love on the personal side how you're playing board games. So,
yeah.
What are your go-to favorites? Like top one, what you would recommend?
Okay. I don't know what I would recommend. Let me think. So I'm like a huge strategy board game nut. Like I like those like weird board games that no one's really
like Settlers of Catan.
Okay, so this is like I love Settlers. I would say Settlers of Catan is one of the few things that like if I had to pick, like for some reason I'm just like very good at Settlers of Catan. So I love it. I like started playing it in grad school, and there was probably a time in grad school where I would play a game of Settlers every night with my friends for like 4 or 5 months. Right, it got bad. Now we've hit the stage where like, most of our friends have been kind of bored of playing it, so we're looking for new games to play. But I do love Settlers. Like I'm a big fan of just simple card games. Like we're a big Bridge family, which I know is like a very classic old person game. And I've started playing Bridge because I played it with my grandfather. So stuff
Have
like that.
you ever played Cranium or Taboo?
Yeah, so I love Taboo. Haven't played that much Cranium. I'm a big fan of Taboo, a big fan of Catchphrase, like any of the like team-based.
Oh, if you like that, then you're going to love Cranium.
Oh, perfect.
I mean, my two favorites are Taboo and Cranium. They're the go-to because one, they offer any level of experience. So you could be a beginner to expert, you could be young, you can be old, it doesn't matter. And it's very easy and quick to learn, but it's also extremely engaging. So it's fun for people that might not like strategy, but there's not really luck involved, which is what I like. It actually requires some skill and teamwork. And so I love Taboo. I always start with Taboo as like the primer, getting everyone's juices flowing and their energy flowing. And then you move into Cranium and it's like smooth transition.
Look at you, you've got a
I got a whole plan, so whenever you're ready to get to Tampa, we're gonna game out. I have Settlers of Catan too. For
perfect,
once the people die out from the other games and the intense gamers, we can move into the Settlers of Catan.
I love it. No, I have. There's been so many times I've been in line for something, and I pulled out like the Taboo or Catchphrase app on my phone and gotten our friends into a game.
On the apps too.
Yeah.
Heads Up by Ellen DeGeneres. That's a great one.
I love it. There's one game, if you're looking for like kind of an app-based game, it's something people haven't heard of. I'd recommend, I won't describe it because it's kind of complicated, but recommend everyone look up this game called Spyfall if you like those sorts of games.
Spyfall.
Yeah, like the James Bond movie.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listeners, check it out. Spyfall. You heard it first.
It's interesting, right? It reminds me a lot of like the Taboo Cranium, like you're playing it as a group. It's like a mix of that plus like the old like the Mafia game, right? Where everyone puts someone dies. It's kind of fun.
And were you in New York? Let's go back to when you first made the Forbes list. Where were you when you found out? And were you in New York? Were you in Tennessee? What do you remember about that moment?
What I remember about making the list, yeah. So, I honestly I was still in grad school when I made the list, right? And, as a grad student, you're very much like heads down working on your research, like not really thinking on like next steps and like lists like Forbes and stuff like that. But I was nominated by my school. I remember I had a couple interviews like back, I guess this was, I don't even remember the year, but November
2016.
October, that year, right? Yeah. So that year, I remember, and I kind of forgotten about it. I hadn't heard anything about it for a while, and like didn't really know what was happening. I was at home for Christmas, and I was flying back to New York. So I was actually on my way to the airport to fly back to New York. It was like January 1st or January 2nd or whatever the day was. And someone in my department tweets congratulations and tags me like at Neel Madhukar. I'm like, what is he congratulating me for? And then so I opened the tweet and like I messaged him like, yeah, what's up? Like, did something happen? Like, am I missing something? Like sits right next to me. So I thought it was a work thing. I'm like, oh, did we get a good scientific result? Or like, what's going on here? And then he just tweets like, oh, check out Forbes.com. And like, still I'm like, what is he talking about? Not even remembering that this list was something we had been nominated for. And then I remember pulling it up and then just like telling my parents in the car, I'm like, oh, I guess I made the Forbes 30 under 30 list. I don't even remember what my parents' first reaction was because they were driving me to the airport. I think their first reaction was like, what are you talking about? Like, you're not.
They must have been so proud of you.
Yeah, and then I was like, I don't know, like it is. And then they were all like, everyone was super happy, and they were like, I almost missed my flight because we were like chatting in the car, and I'm the type of person that goes to the airport like right before the gate closes. So
and they were wondering, Forbes list, like you're not a business person, and most people don't know this, that Forbes names the top 30 leaders, celebrities, stars, entrepreneurs in the world in 20 different industries, 20 different categories. In your case, it was healthcare.
Yeah, so it was a cool moment, right? I think it was, like I remember getting back to New York and like then I got back off the plane and like turned my phone back on and just like this litany of messages and be like, hey, I saw you on this list. I'm like, yeah, hey, like
very
thanks,
proud
guys.
moment.
It was a cool moment, certainly. It was something I was not even close to expecting, but it was fun.
So you're in grad school. Tell us about that moment when you found success. How did you come across this? What led you to the path you're on now?
Yeah, great question. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. If you had asked me when I was 10 years old, even before, right? Like literally outside, like what I wanted to be, I would have almost certainly told you I wanted to be a physician, right? Like like treating patients. My family is a mix of engineers and physicians, right? Like it's pretty much equally split down the middle. And I always kind of like really admired that sort of the medical world, both in terms of seeing my family members do it, but also because I was the kid who stayed up late watching those old medical TV shows like House and Scrubs. I'm like, I want to be that person. And that was super cool to me. And up to my sophomore year of college, that's what I was on. I was pre-med. I loved math, but like didn't really see any way to combine biology and math, so I was sticking with just math. Pre-med, taking all the med school classes, interning at hospitals, working with physicians. And my sophomore year of college, my grandfather, who I was very, very close to, actually lived with us for a while and kind of helped raise me and do a lot of the things that I'm passionate about today, ended up being diagnosed and later passing away from a very rare form of cancer. And I remember part of his treatment protocol was clinical trials. So he had some of the best physicians in one of the best hospitals in the world, newest medicine. And like, I was pretty young then. I remember after he got to a point where it was clear he wasn't going to make it, like wanting to, I kind of regret to say, but like wanting to be angry at someone, being like, what's going on? Like, whose fault is this? And like, the more I thought about it, I was like, I can't really blame anyone. Like, the doctors did the best they could. Everyone here did the best they could. It's just like, there's nothing that could be done. And that was kind of the moment when I first started to think about the other side of medicine. Like, okay, fine. Like, you could have the best doctor in the world, but like, if you just don't have a treatment, like, you're still kind of trapped. And the more I looked into it, the more I learned that there were so many treatments out there that maybe could have helped them that were just stuck in that development phase. And, for people who don't know, developing a new drug is like one of the most costly, time-consuming, and hardest things anyone or any company can take on, right? It takes about 15 years for a single drug to go from the lab to the patients. About $2 billion is some average estimates, and that 99% of the drugs fail along the way. So most drugs don't even make it to the end. And I think this was kind of when I started realizing, like, okay, like there's this whole other side of medicine here. I started getting really interested in that, learning a little bit more. This was right around the time genetics was becoming a real big thing. And I was lucky enough to get an opportunity to work with the DoD on one of their first prostate cancer projects. A friend of mine introduced me to someone there, and we just started talking. And the way genetics first was being analyzed was very much a mix of mathematics, computer science, and biology. And like that was the first time I was like, oh, cool! Like this math I've been learning for so long, like actually could be applied to these biological problems, and we can do something good here. And I think I kind of fell in love almost instantly with like this idea of computational biology there. So spent more time my junior year thinking about it, decided I wanted to take a slight left turn and applied to graduate schools instead of medical schools. I remember interviewing at a bunch of different ones. And then I remember at my Cornell interview, Dr. Elemento, so Olivier Elemento, my co-founder and my professor, was giving a talk to all potential recruits. And he talked about his research, and he described the Precision Medicine Center, which Cornell was just opening up, of this basically the intersection of computational work, patient care, allowing researchers to really impact patient care and really impact drug discovery, and talked about a few case studies. And I remember immediately after his talk, I sent him an email, still in the interview, being like, hey, that's what I want to do. Like, if I come to Cornell, I want to work with you, and like, I really only want to work with you. And, luckily—
What a compliment.
Yeah, things worked out, got in, started working with him, and the rest is a little bit of history, right? Spent, from day one, started working with him, thinking about like, how can we actually use computers and AI to better drug discovery, better precision medicine. Ultimately, the technology formed the basis of what we're building at OneThree. Yeah, and to your second question, like when I found success, right? Like I don't know if I ever really had that aha moment, and I still don't think I've ever had that aha moment. Like people always ask me, like, when did you know you wanted to start a company? When was it like, did I have something? It was never really like that for me, right? Like I think part of what I think as a grad school or being a scientist teaches you is to like question everything, and like I think more importantly that applies to your own work as well, right? So even when an experiment I had worked out, I would be the type of person who's like, okay, cool. But like, what am I missing? Right? Like, there's more to this story. I think that is helpful to me because it helped, grow that part of me and make me a more inquisitive scientist. But a stance of that is, even nowadays at OneThree, like even though I really strongly believe we have something. There's not like a moment like we're successful, we're done. Right? There's always more to do, always more to build.
It reminds me of Stephen Hawking when after he finished his thesis, the famous question they asked him, "What are you going to do next?" And he says, "I'm going to prove my thesis wrong."
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
He was going to argue against his own work.
Yeah, I think
so questioning everything is such a great tip of advice. It's like making sure that you are always questioning everything, everyone, even for the sake of the mind expansion exercise that it provides you with. And I love that you were thinking, how can I take this theoretical approach? I don't want this to just end up as a research publication. I want to see how can I tangibly impact humans' lives. And you bridged that connection. And you were like, 15 years, we need to accelerate this process a bit, guys. What have we been doing in here?
Yeah, no. So we're working on it, right? Like, we're a young company and there's still a lot of work to be done, and drug discovery is a gargantuan task. And I will say, like, the people working on this problem are some of, even outside of our company, especially outside of our company, are some of the most talented, smartest, dedicated people I've ever met in my life. But it's a hard task. And, our goal is to try and impact in whatever little way we can. We believe we have something and it could be useful, but, it's on us to basically prove it. I think at a certain point, like, the onus of responsibility comes on us. And that's why I started the company, realizing that, like, if we wanted this to get out, we had to do it ourselves. And now we're at this place where, luckily we have the privilege to try and go out and build it.
It's admirable that you look at it that way. And I empathize with you because I was also pre-med. I wanted to be an ophthalmologist, eye surgeon, and I had shadowed eye doctors specifically since I was like 11 years old. Always wanted to do it, and I was pre-med, ended up working for the New York Yankees team physician, worked in emergency medicine. I love the route of emergency medicine because it's ever changing. You never know what to expect.
It's always something new, yeah.
With ophthalmology, it was a little predictable. With PCP, primary care physician, it was too predictable as well. And so I love that emergency medicine, but then the day-to-day lifestyle is just, it's not nearly what you expect it to be. And when you're watching House, for example, and you're learning about Occam's razor, and you're learning all these cool, innovative, I'm going to be this creative problem solver. And sometimes it doesn't always look like that in real life.
Yeah.
But what I love about your work is you took a personal story, a personal pain, and turned it into an impact that you're creating for others because your family member had this. And my dad was, recently passed from melanoma, and it was 1.5 years from diagnosis to when he passed away. And we had Dr. Mario Snow and Dr. Alice Lee from Yale Oncology. I mean, some of the best in the world, Moffitt Cancer Center here in Tampa, all working on this. And there's just so much work to be done, even with how much progress has been made, more specifically in the past 5 years with melanoma specifically. I mean, phase 3 trials need to be accelerated, and the amount of time it takes from the idea or theoretical conception to when it can actually be applied in phase 3 trials with a high success rate is, I'm really excited about your work because I'm hoping that we can save more people's lives like your family member and my father in the future for other people.
Yeah, no, man, I completely agree. And thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry that happened, right? Like, I always say, I think the saddest thing about my story is that it's not a very unique story, right? Like, everyone around the world, either their own family or knows someone whose family has been affected by, cancer or a different rare untreated disease. And I think one thing I love about biotech entrepreneurship specifically, or this, it's just like, there's so many personal stories. Like, the people you meet are driven by, motives far more than just like monetarily, right? Like, there's a reason they want to do it. And like, even in our team, right? Like, my co-founders have had people, who've dealt with serious illnesses or family members who passed away, and the people we've recruited, and it brings this sort of like energy and drive that I feel privileged to like be a part of it, to like lead a team working on that.
Isn't it one? Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Neel, but isn't it 1 out of every 2 people will now get cancer at one point in their lifetime?
Yeah, so I don't know the specific stat, but I've heard numbers very similar to that, right? And I think cancer is now becoming a disease where certain people. So, for instance, like it's now less becoming a question for a lot of doctors I talk to of like, if you'll get cancer. It's like, if people live long enough, something's probably going to happen, right? For instance, like prostate cancer, right? For a lot of people, it's not that serious because they get it in old age. But if people start living longer, if people are being healthier, right? Like, these cancers, most people assume you'll eventually get it. So it is becoming much, much harder. And on the other side, right, we're trying to push, very rightly so, this idea of precision medicine around the world, right? Like, treating patients as individuals and designing treatments that are suited to them. And as more and more people start to get it, and as cancer becomes more diverse and evolves, like, it's going to be even more important to like have a very active approach to like new drug discovery in cancer, which we're doing. Hundreds of other companies in this world are doing, right, ranging from big pharma to small startups. And like, I'm just super happy we get to be a part of this movement.
Well, that's why I like that you're using machine learning, because you're accelerating the discoveries that you can make as cancer is evolving, you're evolving and trying to stay one step ahead. That's why I'm really excited about, genomics and also stem cell therapy and how we can alter and edit the genes to change things. That my father went through, he just had a mole on his back.
Yeah.
And, about 5 years ago, it was remarkable, malignant. So they resected it, and all of his reevaluations were unremarkable. So his lymph node biopsies, everything was normal. He had no signs of it or anything. What we didn't know, it was metastasizing, and it ended up being metastatic brain cancer because of that. So, and it was, that's why they called that specifically the silent killer. And then by then it was too late. So we had to move from deciding on neurosurgery to stereotactic radiation to then chemo, the BRAF MEK inhibitors, and then ultimately to the Ipi-Nivo immunotherapy treatment, which has been seen to have promising results. But once it's too late, it's a little hard. So where do you see the cancer treatments moving based on your work? Because I was just listening to a TED talk of I think it was a Stanford cardiologist, and they were this was like the leading expert in using stem cells specifically for the heart tissue, assigning that role. And I remember this line, and then I'll let you share. they said, we thought we had it. I projected about 1.5 years it would be in phase 3 trials because we saw it working in the lab. It's now been 20 years and we still haven't figured it out because I guess when it went to phase 3 trials, it worked to a point, and then unfortunately it was not working after a 6-month period. So where do you see things going in the future with cancer treatment?
It's a great question. So I will give kind of a roundabout answer. I think what we're seeing in cancer is this amazing emergence of new technology, right? You mentioned a few, from immunotherapies, CAR T cells, to stem cell treatments, to microbiome and new radiation, to more targeted drugs, right? The small molecule world, and I'll try not to get too technical here. But what we've seen more often than not is like there's two sides to this question, and we always say at OneThree is like there's the what, like what is working and what's going to be the next step, and then underneath the what there's the why, right? Like why is this working? Or kind of in this example you mentioned, like if something's not working, why is it not working? And I kind of love biology because it almost feels like one of the last frontiers that we're really trying to understand, right? Like the bigger question is, can you figure out like why the human body is working the way it is? Why is immunotherapy working? Why are new targeted drugs working or not? And that's kind of how we frame the question at OneThree. Like we are trying to solve the why. We are trying to understand that deep biological insight, and that could be used across the board. If you could figure out why cancer is evolving or why one drug is working and why not the other, of course, you can guaranteed use that for on immediate patient treatment. But you can also use that to like understand the bigger question, right? If you can understand why the human body works the way it works, right? You could use existing technologies or even develop technologies that we might not even have thought about yet, right? And I think that's kind of the limiting step, right? Understanding enough and then saying like, how do we actually treat this? I think what you're going to see, and I'll speak to a little bit to my expertise here, right? And I don't know as much about some of these other fields, but most of what we work on are like small molecules and immunotherapies, right? So drugs that hit the human body. I think you're going to start to see, we're kind of passing the age of traditional chemotherapy, right? Chemotherapy was you give a drug, it kills everything. Hopefully it kills more cancer than it kills non-cancer. You're now seeing drugs become super targeted. So how can you design a drug that specifically only hits cancer or specifically only hits cancer in certain patients? I think what you're going to start to see is as we understand more biology, you're going to start seeing combinations of drugs being layered. We're working on a few partnerships where it's, if you hit this type, the cancer will evolve and escape this way. If you hit it over here, it'll escape this way. So let's give a combination of drugs to block all escape points. And I think that's where you're going to start to see the future of cancer care go. Like not any single one treatment or therapy or approach, but like how can you design a combination approach suited to a specific patient to make sure you're not just treating the cancer now, but hopefully preventing its recurrence later.
Yeah, that's a great point. It might not necessarily be a cure, but it'll be more targeted. So there'll be less repercussions or consequences or, side effects. Now, thinking about you in this field and the progress that you've made, what do you think for you was the most important personal attribute that got you to where you are today? The single most important attribute. So I'm sure other people are in this field and like, man, I really want to get to this point of Dr. Neel's success and progress. And what would you say is the single most important attribute?
I don't know, right? It's funny you ask this question because this is actually a question we ask, we're hiring, we interview people, we ask similar questions. And I always say, like, I don't really know if I have a good answer myself. So I'll maybe give a couple things, right? I think one is not even an attribute of myself, but I think what's gotten to me where I am is the people who've been around me, right? I think you learn so much. So many people are lucky just to absorb the knowledge of the people we've had, right? My co-founders, to the people I worked with, like the person who I was 1 year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, is not the person I am today. I think a big part of that is just like who I've had the privilege of interacting with. On like a slightly more personal note, like one thing I would just encourage, I think I kind of view startups as like, starting OneThree is like the most fulfilling, exciting thing I've done and also the most terrifying thing I've ever done. And especially, you talk about, I think like when you talk about questioning everything, there's a challenge of turning into like kind of a cynic about everything and like not hoping on everything. And I would say like I think a lot of my friends and people I'm close to would describe me as a bit of an optimist. And even though I'm questioning a lot of these things, like I still do fundamentally believe that there's an opportunity to do good and an opportunity for like the things we're working on could help. And I think that's been super important, especially in like the research world, where like, you know, I'm fully prepared for at OneThree, if we build 100 things, 50% of them may not work. If 50% of them work, fantastic. But like just building in that mentality both within myself and within the company that like failure is okay, and like failing on something doesn't mean you lose the optimism you have for the future. Specifically, you know, because I think at the end of the day, like I think the best, I'm a new CEO, but I think the best CEOs will hire people much smarter than them. And, you know, if OneThree succeeds because I am technically the smartest person, then that means I haven't done my job. I should be hiring people smarter.
You want A+ players.
Exactly. People who are better at cancer biology, better at coding, better at machine learning than me or anyone else on the team. And
I like that. So surround yourself with really smart people. You don't want to be the smartest person in the room. There's a great book called The Who by Jeff Smart, and it's amazing at weeding out the B and C players in your hiring process. And what I like about it is he walks you through step by step, explicitly telling you what to do in the interview process to make sure you're only hiring A+ players.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. You know, to be fair, I feel like it's been many years since I've been the smartest person in the room. Right now, it's at our team meetings, I'm very usually not, and I love that. But I also think it's as much about hiring the A+ people as finding the people and molding them, giving them the environment to become A+ people, right?
Grow.
You know, when I started, like I was not an A+ CEO by any definition of that when I started the company, right? And I may not be now, right? But I think I'm just thinking about like the growth, the people who gave me the opportunity to learn and to grow in that, and just like giving that to people we bring on, right? So in addition to like finding the best people, you know, I think it's important for business leaders, anyone working in this, to think about like, what can I do to give this person who I trust and who I want to work in my company the environment for them to succeed and grow into what they want to be. Specifically because like all of my friends who have like left high-paying jobs or good jobs, a lot of times they told me it's because they didn't feel like they could do their best work there. Right? It wasn't the, you know, limited sample, but I feel like most people probably don't leave because, you know, pays a little bit bad. It's like, you know, they don't have the experience to grow. And that's what I think we hope to build at OneThree, to give the people, hire A+ people and give everyone a chance to become, you know, A+.
If you can't
like,
find the environment, if you can't find the environment that's conducive to your growth, then create one or find another one.
Exactly. And I think one of the things I think about remote work is I think a big kind of underlying principle in remote work is like employee flexibility, right? The underlying is like give people the flexibility to work and how they want to work. And I think a silver lining of all of that is it should ideally become a little bit easier for companies, if they accept that, to give people the environment, to create that environment, right? Not everyone is now forced to be in the same environment, which may work for some, may not work for others. And it gives companies the opportunity to be much more inclusive, right? Like for instance, like some people might have disabilities which prevent them from thriving in one environment, but now if companies can be open to that, and you know, I think this is accelerating that. You can think about like, how can I bring in those people who I might not have even realized or haven't given the opportunity before, and give them the spot to succeed.
That's a great point. And during this journey, what do you think's been maybe your biggest lesson you've learned that maybe you wish you had learned sooner?
Oh my God, so many things.
Like for me, I wish I would have read self-improvement books earlier in my career.
So I would say the biggest thing I've learned, and this is a little bit, and it's okay to not know something. And it's okay to kind of just be okay. Like you have to be okay with that, right? Like I remember my very first fundraising pitch, right? This was so long ago, I don't even remember the who, but I know I was in there being like, this is a clear plan. Like we're going to do all of this. This is how the environment's going to go, and this is how the market's going to go. All of these things. And to be fair, I think some entrepreneurs do this fantastically, and you know, it's kind of depends on the way you run as a person. But the more I did that, I was like, I feel like I'm saying things like I don't even know if I believe it, right? Because like there's so many unknowns, especially in our industry. Like no one knows what really healthcare is going to be like. You know, AI's never really been applied. Like the business models are kind of unclear. We're planning things, and if you don't admit you don't know, you're never going to get to a place where you can ask people for help or ask for different opinions, right? And so I think that's kind of one thing I'd wish I'd learned a little bit earlier, to kind of come in and be like, yo guys, like, here's what I think, but I fundamentally don't know the answer, but here's what I could use help. If there's there's one thing people have banged into me as an entrepreneur, is like, you have to ask for help so many times, and you have to be not shy about asking. The worst thing people can do is say, like, I can't help you, but I find that people are more willing to help and friendlier than you might think. But if you never give them the chance, you're probably not going to see it.
People are so important. And it sounds like there was a lot of pivotal people in your life. Who was your coach or mentor during this time?
I kind of feel like I had a few different coaches, right? Scientifically, Olivier, my co-founder and my professor, was like kind of like my scientific, he guided my scientific journey, thinking about how I think about problems. And I'm sure, you can ask people in the lab, like I was oftentimes described as like a mini Olivier, because like I learned to think about problems the same way he thought about problems, for good and bad. On a personal side, right, like I think, my family, my parents and my grandfather have always been huge mentors, right? Like my dad has been kind of a serial entrepreneur, just trying new things, right? Ranging from writing children's books to building a educational company while being a professor. And my mom just has probably one of the most like incredible work ethics I've seen, right? She came to this country, while being pregnant with myself and later my sister, had got a master's, had a job. Now she's like a director of this relatively larger, tech consulting firm. And then just ranging out across, like my sister is one of the, she's not a scientist, but like she kind of, I was a scientific snob when I was growing up. I'll be fully honest, right? Like I grew up in like an Indian family and I was good at bio and math. And I was like, yeah, this is the perfect. And my sister was not. She was a great speaker and she was good at English, and just like the people around me, her, like my girlfriend showed me doing things. Like, so I feel like rather than just one coach, it's like trying to absorb bits and pieces from everyone, ranging from like the work ethic of my mom, the scientific knowledge from Olivia, or my girlfriend, like the way she thinks about questions, and she's also a scientist. We met in grad school. The way she thinks about questions and that deep analytical mind is something that I'm continually trying to build. And people are better. You
complement each other. Things that maybe you found yourself weak in, they had a strength, and you complement each other well. And that's actually a great tip, I think, in general for your peers, is instead of looking at what they're not, look at what they are. What is the value, their strength, and that you could possibly assimilate to your own
and I will say, like, I think I mentioned earlier, right? Like a great thing about, I think every startup founder needs to have a community of founders, right? Both founders at the same stage as them and founders at a greater stage. Like there are so many founders that are much bigger companies than I am, and just like learning from them. I think like, I don't love the word, I don't usually call them a coach, just because I think it's a very much like, sometimes that implies a one-sided relationship. I think we're both learning from each other, and it's an opportunity for me to like learn from them and get to know them, not as like this coach or this other thing, but like as a person, and like what are their faults, what are they struggling with, what can I do to help. But yeah, there's been so many fellow CEOs that have taught me lessons that I've learned from their experience. And
you want a synergistic relationship where when you level up and grow, they level up and grow at the same time.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Obviously there's times when we're building a startup and you're going through transitions, deciding between medical school and grad school. You sometimes have to do things to hustle and get by. And especially when you're in grad school and you're trying to make it big, you're trying to find that one doctor's email so I can get a direct contact with them. What's something scrappy you did to hustle that maybe you couldn't have revealed when you were first starting out, but you could reveal now?
It's a great question. And so one of the things that I'll talk about business, right? When I was first thinking about starting a company, I had no idea what that was like, right? Never started a company before, never really took business classes, this has not been part of my mind, right? I was a doctor and then I was a scientist, and all of a sudden I was thinking of becoming an entrepreneur. But one of the great things about being a graduate student is you have an @cornell.edu email address. So I sent a ton of emails to the business leaders being like, hi, I'm a Cornell student. I'm like doing research for a paper, writing a paper. Can I pick your brain for a few minutes?
Everybody loves helping a student.
Exactly. And like people are so willing to like share. And like, to be fair, like I won't say who, because some of them are our competitors nowadays. But, people were willing to like give information and like talk through and, you know, allow me to learn in like a way that like I don't think I would have been possible if, you know, I just been like, hey, I'm starting a company. Can you talk, right? And so that was like maybe something. Maybe I shouldn't have done it. Who knows? But it allowed me to like accelerate my learning and get in front of people. You know, since then I've kind of become a little bit, like I said, you have to get. You know, this is back when I had a hard time really asking for help and all those things. Since then I've become a little bit shameless. It's just like, yo, I need help with this. Come talk to me. But back in those days,
yeah, you got to use
helpful.
this. Got to use the student card.
Yeah, exactly.
You're only going to have it for a brief moment in time, so use that student card.
Yeah, we have a bunch
shadow people, get as much information as you can. I mean, you and I had similar paths because I started, you know, pre-med, and ultimately the reason I ended up switching career paths is not because I just didn't like the day-to-day life. Yeah, that was part of it. But I ended up becoming a finalist on Shark Tank, the TV show on ABC. And I was like enthralled by the idea of entrepreneurship. I was like, business is amazing. I'm going to grad school for business. I'm doing it. And my mom's like, what the hell is an entrepreneur?
yeah, that's a whole different thing.
Who the hell quits the New York Yankees? She was pissed.
Yeah, I get it.
And for you even more, I mean, that must have been how did you convince your parents, like, parents, I'm not taking the typical route. I'm not following medicine. I'm going to go more business side, more entrepreneurial side. Were they a little scared for you?
Yes. And I think, to be fair, I'm not sure if I've still convinced them this is the right thing. You know, whenever like something goes wrong, like I'll hear my parents or like extended family like, you can still apply to med school. And I'm like, yeah. You know, I don't know. I think one thing I love about my parents is that, you know, they are very understanding of being like, you can't really do what you have to love what you want to do. And I think at a certain point it became clear, like, this is where my heart was at. And, you know, I could do great things. Right? And, you know, there's the side of a parent that like wants their child to be comfortable and successful, you know, financially. And then there's the side that wants them to be happy, you know, in their personal life. And, you know, entrepreneurship, it's a tough road, but there's an opportunity to do both. Right. And I think, there's a good time to do it. And also, like, I think at a certain point, it's also just like thinking through, like, you know, I was young at the time, still relatively young in the grand scheme of things, right? When else are you going to get a chance to try this, right? Like, it was a cool opportunity, and go through
it. Do it when you're young.
Yeah.
Experiment with as many things as possible.
Yeah, and I also think, like, to be honest, like, I don't know if this is ever you know, written down, but like, I think there was also thinking about go, no-go points, right? Like, at a certain point, you know, when I first started, I was like, this is my goal. And like, I have 2 years, I have a postdoc at Cornell. Like, here's what I want to accomplish in those 2 years. You know, maybe I have an idea, but like, if I don't get it done in 2 years or people just not responding, like, maybe I need to reevaluate my thoughts. And it's not like I'm so down the road, I can't go back and change. And then, you know, just start to see those things, the successes line up. And then I think the people who care about you will kind of rally to your side and be like, okay, cool. Like, we're supportive in this with you.
Yes. I call those pivot, persevere moments. You either pivot or persevere. And I encourage people to do them every quarter.
Yeah.
In everything that you're doing. It might be even the gym that you're going to. Do I want to keep going to this gym? Is my workout routine going well? Do I need to pivot or persevere? My career, the relationships, because as you mentioned, I mean, you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. You are very much a compilation of the people you meet, the books you read, the experiences you experience, the places you travel to, and that becomes who you are as a person. And so you need to be selective on the people that you're surrounding yourself with, the choices that you're making, the books you're reading, etc.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, right? And I think, you know, I always wish I had more time to read, partially because of that, right? Like, you just absorb so much knowledge that I don't think you get if you're just like so singularly focused. And I know entrepreneurs tend to, like, there's so much to do. Sometimes you tend to be just like, I have to get this done. But I always think it's kind of helpful to take a step back and be like, okay, like, you know, where is my pivot, persevere moment? I think that's a good phrase. And then what do I need to do to learn and convince myself a little bit more?
That's why it's so important to have a diverse group of peers that you regularly access. I started this mastermind, has become a bastardized term, but have you heard of the word mastermind?
Yeah.
Okay. So mastermind, I'm not sure if you know where it came from. In 1927, the term was coined by Dale Carnegie. He was studying all the most influential entrepreneurs in the world. specifically in the U.S., Rockefeller, Henry Ford, all these amazing, amazing individuals. And he wanted to see, is there a pattern or trend amongst all of them? Is there one thing in common that seems to lead to success for these individuals? So he's studying all these successful entrepreneurs, and he came down to one thing. They all met on a regular basis. They had a regular cadence of meetings with other like-minded, successful people.
Yeah.
And even though the term, he called this the mastermind because he has a circle of minds, it ultimately creates a mastermind. And
I did not know that. Interesting.
Even though the term was coined by Carnegie, it was actually the idea for this regular cadence of meetings was created by Ben Franklin back in 1725, if I recall, back in Philadelphia. And he called it the Junta Club. And the Junta Club, it stands for assemble in Spanish. And he would meet every Friday at a local tavern with other influential individuals. It could be politicians, business people, scientists. He wanted to pull different perspectives from different individuals where they could all talk about maybe things they can't talk about in front of other people. So they wanted to have a diverse but safe place to do that. So I run a monthly Junta Club. I call it the Junta Club of Tampa. And it's an amazing experience. And I encourage everyone to do that because like you said, it's important to have people that you can bounce ideas off of that might not be within your field or your respective industry.
I completely agree. I think, you gain so much, and I didn't know that's where the term came from, but I think you're right? Like it's foolish to think that you yourself, without the help of others, and yet like the melding of minds can get to the states where you're mastering any one thing. And not to say it can't be done, but I think it's so much easier, and it's so much more fulfilling to do it in the company of peers and in the company of others.
Good point. And this segues perfectly. Thinking of books, we're going to segue into a part of the show that I like to call the under 30 seconds round.
Okay.
Going off the Forbes 30 under 30 play. All right. I'm going to fire off a few questions and answer with the first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
Okay. Okay, let's do it.
All right, Dr. Neel, what is the book you've gifted more often than any other book and why?
Okay, the answer is this is a super cliche answer, but I've gifted a ton of like old Disney books, like those like Disney compilations, not for any personal or professional reason, just because I think a good piece of like being an innovative thinker, doing all that is like you have to retain that childish sense of like wonder and excitement, and so like sometimes I gift those. Not the best business answer. I'd say like the business book I'd probably gift the most is it's a little bit old, but Freakonomics, right? Just thinking about things in new ways. I got into that book very late, way after the trend, but I fell in love with it. So those are my two answers.
Freakonomics is great. And in addition to the book, they have a documentary and they even have a podcast now, which is great too.
The podcast used to be my daily commute.
So
now
good.
It's obviously not commuting.
He was just interviewed on Joe Rogan's podcast recently.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's cool. It's the first time I really heard someone pushing back on Joe Rogan so much. It was good.
I'll have to check it out.
Number 2, Dr. Neel, what's one of the best investments and one of the worst investments you've ever made and why?
Whew. Okay, so I'm fairly young and I haven't done that much investing. So my investing will be, so I'll give the best investments. So on a monetary sense, right, like I was lucky enough to put in what little money I had in high school into like Apple back in the day because I was like, this seems like a cool thing. The worst investments is, I'm going to throw my dad under the bus a little bit for this, right? Like back in the day, he was like, oh, you should invest in like those old companies. Like that's where people make money, like GE and stuff. And I did. Obviously, GE stock has not done great since then. And I think it was just like, that taught me, it was just like, you can't always do what people are like, this is what everyone does. It's not a good reason for doing it. Investments out of the financial world, it's like one of the best investments I ever made, like as far as like time, has been just like being willing to like take a step back and like learn a little bit more. Like be like, I want to learn this skill and it's going to be fulfilling. And ranging from like learning new exercise skills, to like learning to play the guitar, to like learning. I'm a big chess player, so I play a lot of chess. And I think as a time investment, like you can't overstate like how much new learning gets you there. I feel like my answers are a little bit longer then, so I'm going to kind of keep the next one short.
No, it's fine. There's learning happening here.
Yeah.
So number 3, what's the most impactful thing you do in your morning routine and the most impactful thing you do in your evening routine?
Whew. Morning, evening. So I'm a big night owl. So my morning routine is usually pretty rushed. So I do my best thinking. I think like I immediately get up and like I know a lot of people like go do a bunch of stuff. Like I immediately get up and like hop straight in the shower and then just like use that as a moment to like reflect on like what I need to do. Like I do my best thinking there. I usually like me and my girlfriend split walking our dog. But you know those morning walks I think are just like a useful way to like de-stress, get some fresh air, like do a lot of that. So I think that's something I really impactful I do in the morning. Evening, I'm catching up a lot of things. My evening routine, I usually like to end the evening with something fun, right? Like don't go straight from work into bed, even if you're super tired. Like whether it's like playing a game playing a game of chess on my phone into bed, or like watching a TV show, just to like end the day on like a positive note and like get to a point where I'm like sleeping and like actually able to relax. I used to, back when I, in the office, I used to wake up, do all of that, and then try and end the day with, a workout. That was just a good way to reassess, right? Don't have access to a gym, so my workouts are now like whenever I have a break within the day. But I think I usually like to start the morning off with like a reflection, and then like the evening with like some sort of unwinding, whatever that may be.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's kind of like the bookends of the day. I always tell people your morning routine is only as good as your evening routine. And I love the morning walk and the morning shower to reflect and have your own personal time so you can be proactive about your day rather than reactive, answering all these emails, texts, social media notifications. And what are you doing for your workout now? Do you use an app? Do you use a program?
No. So I used to use an app. I'm not really, it's like, for my workouts, I'm very much like a go with the flow type of person. Like, I'm like, I know what I want to improve on now, just to keep doing things till something is. My girlfriend's like far more on top of like the latest, like what's actually good workouts. If you have most of my workouts are being like, you'd be like, I'm going to try working on this muscle group. She's like, you should try these exercises. I was like, I'll trust you. I'll do that. I've been trying to get far more into like cardio. Luckily, my parents have a treadmill in the house and an elliptical. So it's been nothing too complicated, just using that.
So here's a cool app that I use anytime I'm traveling or don't have access to a gym.
Yeah.
It's free. It's called the 7-Minute Workout app. It's not, don't worry, it's not only 7 minutes. They have workouts that range from 7 minutes to 27 minutes.
Okay.
And it's Johnson & Johnson created it, and it's the 7-Minute Workout app. It's free. You don't need any equipment. You can do it anywhere with anyone. So you can do it by yourself or with a group of people. It's really convenient.
I'll check it out. No, I've been trying to get a little bit more disciplined about it too. So it's
all plyometrics, calisthenics, cardio. So it's got everything involved. And
cool.
All right, number 4, pretend you won the Peter Thiel Fellowship and you are going to get money to start a business instead of go to college. What's the very first thing you would do to start the new business?
Okay, so I'm going to give an answer that I'm probably not supposed to give. I am very strongly against the Peter Thiel Fellowship for a few different reasons. So I think, like I said, like my background is I always think, like I never really wanted to start a company and I wanted to start this company. And I think it's hard to, especially in healthcare, like I think you need to know the space, and especially in a deep science, like you need to know the science. I don't think I could have, even if I had the exact same idea, I don't think I could have started this company as an 18-year-old just because I didn't know enough. Right? I had to spend the time to learn and do all of that. So, if we're thinking about current Neel and like where I would be, right, like I'd probably say like I'm gonna use the money to re-enroll in college.
That's actually a good point. Tech schools and development boot camps are becoming more and more popular. As Google, Apple, Facebook no longer require degrees. Is there a school for just science? Like, is there a boot camp instead of for coding, but for scientists?
Yeah. So sadly, I have not yet seen one for that. Right? I'd say like what people are starting to do is, and I think part of this is it's not any boot camps. It's just like science has traditionally been like kind of very closed off world, right? Like what you learn in high school, there's not really an opportunity to get involved, right? Both because it's hard to access scientific research. They're done only in a few select places, and there's very much like a a blocking there. I think that's becoming a little bit better, right? Like you're now seeing science become a little bit more democratized, healthcare data become a little bit more democratized. So people are taking control of their own data, learning a little bit more. So I've met high schoolers nowadays who like are spending time in their free time, like learning about things outside of the textbook and like starting to inquisitively question things.
Like master class, because there's like master class for a multitude of industries or experiences you want to learn. And then Coursera, Khan Academy, there's a lot of resources out there for science. So I guess you could do an online version, but I was wondering if there's like an in-person boot camp. And if not, it sounds like it would be a great idea.
I think so. I have seen some of these like tech or coding boot camps offer like a healthcare track, right? Like I know Insight does it. And I think the biggest way is like, what are you trying to learn? Like, are you trying to learn the science? I think the science, you just have to like get an internship at a lab, like find some place that has an opportunity for you to like get involved. If you're trying to learn the tech and apply it to science, these tech boot camps. Then when it comes to a place to choose your project, like think about healthcare, think about those projects, right? We're a little bit weird is that like we are a healthcare company, but really like a deep life science company, right? The problems we're solving aren't like health records based. They're like, let's understand this genetic interaction, this biological protein.
Sure. So there's an academic rigor to it, but I also see that some people are just not meant for academia. I think some people can become amazing scientists, even
100%.
Through a different route. I think people are starting to realize like, maybe I don't need to take the academic route.
100%. Yeah. I think, yeah, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I will just say like we'll talk about the pros and cons of academia another day, but I think there's recently been this huge movement, the fact like even if you're not a professor, you can be a great scientist. And you're seeing a lot of these emerging roles where people's like, I never want to be a professor. I just want to learn this and be good at science, right? Whether it's a staff scientist, whether it's just working in like thinking about problems, right? Like, I think what I learned in grad school was like, I learned science and I memorized some things and learned how to code. But like what I think I really learned in grad school was just how to think about problems. And there's tons of ways you can learn how to think, right? Grad school does not have a monopoly on that. But, I think college and grad school at least give you the sandbox, right? Where you don't have too many other concerns, but like you have the opportunity to develop that muscle.
You don't have too many risks.
Yeah.
That you can explore different things without, losing a company, for example.
Exactly. And like, I don't know if if I'd gotten the Thiel Fellowship, I don't know if I knew how to think out of high school. I think I would have been like, I had an idea, I would have fulfilled it. Like maybe it would have been a good idea, maybe it would not have. And
might not have met the people that you've met. Yeah. And obviously college is great for the social aspect as well. But I remember being pre-med. I don't know if you had the same experience, and I'm learning about biology and chemistry, but my main passion was the human body. And human anatomy and physiology wasn't even a requirement to go to medical school. I'm learning about botany and comparative vertebrate anatomy of a shark. And I'm like, and then I remember, one of the things I remember telling is King Philip came over for good sex. And it was like, this is how my teacher taught me to remember kingdom, phyla, class, order, family, genus, species. Yep. And it's like, okay, but I want to learn about the human body and like how the human body is already amazing at healing itself. Yeah. And this is the stuff that interests me. I'm not interested as much of the, let's say, phylum.
Yeah, I would say for anyone who's like studying this and wants to get involved, like I the best advice I give people is like, just get involved, right? Like I was lucky enough through people I knew and just email outreach I had a chance to like work in a hospital with a few doctors, right? And then I mentioned like I probably wouldn't have gone to grad school unless I had the opportunity to work with the DoD, and like you just have to reach out and be like, yo, like, can I learn a little bit more about this? Like, what is this world actually like? I'm sure you probably had the most experience through your work with the New York Yankees rather than anything you learned in a textbook.
Yeah, a lot of my pre-meds, classmates had not had the real life experience. They were mostly just in the academic world. And I love that about what you said is, maybe you just don't expect your school to do it for you. You go and reach out to a doctor and shadow them, or you go and reach out to maybe someone in the biotech industry or any industry for that matter and say, hey, can I shadow you for a day? Hey, I'm a student. I want to see if this is a career I eventually want to go into. Can I see what the day-to-day life looks like?
And I think most people, like I said, most people are more than willing to like offer some insight, right? You have to be reasonable about what you ask. But like people have reached out to me and be like, hey, I'm curious about entrepreneurship. Can I have 20 minutes? I'm like, yeah, sure. Like 20 minutes is like, that's fine. I'm happy to do it. At a certain point, maybe schedules get too complicated, but
Sure.
there's no harm in asking, right? And I think people will find people say yes more often than they'll say no.
All right, last question. What's
That's
something you never knew you needed?
Never knew I needed. Trying to think. For me personally, like a better organizational system, right? Like I've always been the type of person who's like, oh yeah, I had a good memory. I can remember stuff. And then like when startups happen, like I can no longer remember stuff. So I've been trying to get like really disciplined about like apps like Evernote and like taking notes in like different email clients, basically trying to like, okay, like this is stuff I would have, if someone told me this like a year ago, I'm like, I don't need a note-taking app. Like I'll just write things down on a sheet of paper, or like whatever, it's not that big a deal. But just like stuff like that is something I'm like, I never knew. Like on a professional
So
level, like
my
I need
girlfriend's
it.
the same as you. She's like, oh, I'll just remember it. I'm like, but that's consuming cognitive bandwidth
Yeah.
that could have been utilized for something more important for
Oh yeah.
creative decision making.
I think I dramatically underestimate the cognitive bandwidth's a great word, the decision, like the description. Like I dramatically underestimated like just like how much the effect of like even the stress, like even if you know you can the 10 things you can like get them done easily, but just like the fact of knowing you have to remember these 10 things is just like extra stressor on your day. And that being said, there have been many times where I'll go to a meeting with my team and they're like, did you do this? I'm like, no, I forgot.
Well, this is what
Um,
I do with my clients. So
yeah,
I'm happy to help you when you're ready. And we
yeah,
could talk about that, a
let's do
few
it.
little productivity hacks. And I love organizations. So I'm like what you might be looking for.
I'd love to. Yeah, no, that'd be great. Um,
Perfect. Well,
yeah,
Dr.
so
Neel, thank you so much for being here. Before you go, what's the next big goal or milestone or bucket list item that you want to achieve?
yeah, so I'll say a 1-3 thing, right? So there'll be some news coming out of the company soon, right? Like we're really pushing to try and have our next big proof of concept study, right? Like we were lucky enough to have this great study where we found a new drug that treats rare brain cancers, and we've got a few pharma partnerships now. And like really, like I'm just super. It's like the one thing I'm focused on is like getting those done and showcasing once again like the effect that can have on patients, right? It's a constant milestone, just like what is the next thing we're going to do. And then, honestly, like on my end, for anyone listening, right, like we fundraise and the next big personal milestone is like building a team I can be, a fantastic team who I'm super proud to work with who can go for it, right? So much of, I think, a CEO's job that I didn't realize is just like actually recruiting. I think it's the most important thing, I could probably do for the company.
You're
So
going to love
anyone's,
the book, The Who, then, by
oh,
Jeff
perfect.
Smart.
I'll check it out. Yeah. So if anyone's listening and they're looking for a job, we're hiring. So check us out. But that's my next milestone. Like, get to a place where like, I'm like, we are ready. Like, the team is there now. Like, now let's go and execute on all the things we want to execute on.
Perfect. So, you listeners, you heard it first. If you are looking to get in a biotech industry, you know where to do it.
Yeah.
Where do listeners go to potentially reach out about a career opportunity? And then where do listeners go to connect with you directly?
Yeah, great question, right? So our job postings are all on our Angel List and LinkedIn page, or you can go to our website, OneThree.bio. There's a contact form. Send me anything there. Anyone who's listening who wants to connect with me, just shoot me a LinkedIn message or add me anywhere, right? Or just shoot me a message on the OneThree.bio website, right? I check all of those at the end of every day, and happy to chat with anyone and be helpful in any way I can.
And by the way, for you listening, it's spelled out ONE and three THREE.bio. B-I-O.
Exactly, yeah.
So spell out. Yeah, go ahead.
Good. Oh, I'm saying for the scientists out there, I'm pretty active on Twitter as well. I don't post that much, but I'm reading a bunch. So it's at Neel Madhukar. Shoot me a message. I'll get back to you there as well.
We'll put that handle in the show notes as well. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here today. This is Dr. Neel with OneThree Biotech, who is making cancer research come to fruition with AI and machine learning much faster, more accelerated than we've previously seen. Very exciting. We learned so much today about making sure you're selective on picking your peers and how we can see cancer treatment for the near future. Very exciting news. And thank you so much, Dr. Neel, for being here today. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Phil. It was a pleasure for me as well. And thank you for your time. And I'm looking forward to talking more in the future as well.
Awesome. Hope this episode helped you as much as it helped me. Have an amazing day.
Bye.
Welcome to the Phil with Forbes 30 podcast. This is Phil Michaels, Forbes 30 Under 30 entrepreneur and performance coach. Every year, Forbes names the top 30 entrepreneurs, leaders, and stars in the world. And each week, I bring you one of them to help you level up in your life and business. From celebrities like LeBron James to Kylie Jenner and Cardi B, to entrepreneurs with companies like DoorDash, Instagram, and YouTube, you're sure to learn from the list. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now it's time to level up. Level up.